Active shooter. How to respond. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on the scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. How to respond when an active shooter is in your vicinity. Quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. Remember that customers and clients are likely to follow the lead of employees and managers during an active shooter situation. Evacuate. If there is an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Be sure to have an escape route and plan in mind. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible. Prevent individuals from entering an area where the active shooter may be. Keep your hands visible. Follow the instructions of any police officers. Do not attempt to move wounded people. Call 911 when you are safe. Hide out. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Your hiding place should be out of the active shooter's view. Provide protection if shots are fired in your direction, for example an office with a closed and locked door. Not trap you or restrict your options for movement to prevent an active shooter from entering your hiding place. Lock the door. Blockade the door with heavy furniture. If the active shooter is nearby, lock the door. Silence your cell phone and/or pager. Turn off any source of noise, for example radios or televisions. Hide behind large items like cabinets or desks. Remain quiet if evacuation and hiding out are not possible. Remain calm. Dial 911 if possible to alert police to the active shooter's location. If you cannot speak, leave the line open and allow the dispatcher to listen. Take action against the active shooter. As a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt and/or incapacitate the active shooter by acting as aggressively as possible against him or her, throwing items and improvising weapons, yelling, committing to your actions. Manager section. Training your staff for an active shooter situation. To best prepare your staff for an active shooter situation, create an Emergency Action Plan (EAP) and conduct training exercises. Together, the EAP and training exercises will prepare your staff to effectively respond and help minimize loss of life. Components of an Emergency Action Plan (EAP). Create the EAP with input from several stakeholders, including your Human Resources Department, your Training Department if one exists, facility owners or operators, your property manager, and local law enforcement and/or emergency responders. An effective EAP includes a preferred method for reporting fires and other emergencies, an evacuation policy and procedure, emergency escape procedures and route assignments, for example floor plans and safe areas, contact information for and responsibilities of individuals to be contacted under the EAP, information concerning local area hospitals like name, telephone number, and distance from your location, an emergency notification system to alert various parties of an emergency including individuals at remote locations within premises, local law enforcement, local area hospitals. Components of training exercises. The most effective way to train your staff to respond to an active shooter situation is to conduct mock active shooter training exercises. Local law enforcement is an excellent resource in designing training exercises. Recognizing the sound of gunshots. Reacting quickly when gunshots are heard and/or when a shooting is witnessed. Evacuating the area. Hiding out. Acting against the shooter as a last resort. Calling 911. Reacting when law enforcement arrives. Adopting the survival mindset during times of crisis. Reactions of managers during an active shooter situation. Employees and customers are likely to follow the lead of managers during an emergency situation. During an emergency, managers should be familiar with their EAP and be prepared to take immediate action, remain calm, lock and barricade doors, evacuate staff and customers via a pre-planned evacuation route to a safe area, assisting individuals with special needs and/or disabilities. Ensure that EAPs, evacuation instructions, and any other relevant information addressed to individuals with special needs and/or disabilities. Your building should be handicap accessible in compliance with ADA requirements. Recognizing potential workplace violence. An active shooter in your workplace may be a current or former employee, or an acquaintance of a current or former employee. Intuitive managers and coworkers may notice characteristics of potentially violent behavior in an employee. Alert your human resources department if you believe an employee or coworker exhibits potentially violent behavior. Indicators of potential violence by an employee. Employees typically do not just snap, but display indicators of potentially violent behavior over time. If these behaviors are recognized, they can often be managed and treated. Potentially violent behaviors by an employee may include one or more of the following. This list of behaviors is not comprehensive, nor is it intended as a mechanism for diagnosing violent tendencies. Increased use of alcohol and/or illegal drugs. Unexplained increase in absenteeism, vague physical complaints. Noticeable decrease in attention to appearance and hygiene. Depression or withdrawal. Resistance and overreaction to changes in policy and procedures. Repeated violations of company policies. Increased severe mood swings. Noticeably unstable emotional responses. Explosive outbursts of anger or rage without provocation. Suicidal. Comments about putting things in order. Behavior which is suspect of paranoia. Everybody is against me. Increasingly talks of problems at home. Escalation of domestic problems into the workplace. Talk of severe financial problems. Talk of previous incidents of violence. Empathy with individuals committing violence. Increase in unsolicited comments about firearms, other dangerous weapons, and violent crimes. Managing the consequences of an active shooter situation. After the active shooter has been incapacitated and is no longer a threat, human resources and/or management should engage in post-event assessments and activities, including an accounting of all individuals at a designated assembly point to determine who, if anyone, is missing and potentially injured. Determining a method for notifying families of individuals affected by the active shooter, including notification of any casualties. Assessing the psychological state of individuals at the scene and referring them to healthcare specialists accordingly. Identifying and filling any critical personnel or operational gaps left in the organization as a result of the active shooter.